The mansion was wrapped in silence, the kind that made every breath feel stolen. A storm brewed outside, rattling the old windows, while inside the dim hall, gold chandeliers flickered with dying light. Then the sound cracked. A single gunshot echoed like thunder, and silence shattered into chaos. The powerful king of the cartel fell, crimson spreading across the marble floor like a map of betrayal. His bloodied hand trembled as he reached for the phone, his lips quivering with his final strength. "It's done," he whispered into the receiver, his voice a rasp lost in the cavernous room. "The king is dead." Somewhere in the shadows, eyes watched with cold patience, unseen but orchestrating. The empire's crown lay in ruins, but the story had just begun. Was this a coup, a revenge, or a deal written long before the trigger was pulled? The storm outside howled like an omen, whispering that the world of power, family, and blood had shifted forever. Detective Marcus said, "The king's death will not stop the storm, it will unleash it." In the city, neon lights painted broken promises across rain-slick streets. The underworld buzzed with whispers, each gang sensing opportunity, each rival hungering for the vacant throne. Marcus watched from his car, cigarette glowing in the rain, knowing the night had changed everything. His informants murmured of shifting loyalties, of a war ready to ignite. He whispered to himself, "The crown has fallen, but the vultures circle fast." Isabella said, "Blood ties mean nothing when power is at stake." She stood at the balcony of her penthouse, storm winds lashing her silk dress. She had lost a brother, but her eyes were cold steel. The city stretched beneath her, unaware of the storm behind the glass. Her mind sharpened, calculating her next move, alliances forming like daggers. She whispered into her phone, "Tell them the empire has no king. Tell them the game begins now." Luca said, "The blood on the marble floor is only the beginning." In a dim underground bar, smoke curled above tables where gangsters gathered. The news spread fast, and with it, greed bloomed. Some toasted to freedom, others sharpened knives for betrayal. Luca leaned forward, whispering to his men, "The dead man's crown belongs to us, but we must strike before dawn." Their eyes gleamed, loyal but restless, each knowing that loyalty had an expiration date. Sophia said, "I saw his eyes before he fell. It wasn't fear, it was betrayal." She sat in a candlelit chapel, whispering confessions no priest could absolve. Her hands shook, rosary slipping between her fingers. She prayed, but her faith cracked under the weight of what she witnessed. The empire's fall was written in her tears. She whispered, "God forgive me, for I know this war will consume us all." Detective Marcus said, "Every empire bleeds when the throne is empty." The morgue was cold, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting pale shadows across the body of the king. The coroner pulled back the sheet, revealing the lifeless face that once commanded fear. Marcus lit another cigarette, his hands shaking, the weight of war pressing into his lungs. He knew the city was a powder keg, and this body was the spark. He whispered, "The wolves smell blood, and they are already circling." The city, outside, groaned with sirens, a restless heartbeat. The dead king's eyes remained closed, but his legacy screamed louder than the storm. Marcus felt the chill crawl under his skin, as he realized the law was powerless. Luca said, "The streets will choose their new king by sunrise." In the back room of a smoky nightclub, men drank and laughed too loudly, but their eyes betrayed hunger. The music outside pounded like a war drum, neon colors bleeding into the darkened chamber. Luca leaned over the table, his voice a low growl. "Power is never given, it's taken." His men nodded, but their loyalty was heavy with fear. He slammed his glass down, declaring, "The blood spilled tonight is only the down payment." The room fell silent, each man calculating what share of the empire might fall into his hands. Outside, the night pressed against the glass, heavy with promises of violence. Isabella said, "They think I am grieving, but I am calculating." She stood in a silk robe before her mirror, lightning streaking across the city skyline behind her. Her reflection glimmered with firelight from a nearby candle, shadows twisting her features. The phone on her vanity vibrated, endless messages of condolences that meant nothing. She whispered, "The Empire is not lost. It is mine." Her hand clenched the vanity edge until her knuckles turned white. Her grief was not weakness, it was armor. She knew rivals were already aligning like sharks, but she would bleed them dry before she allowed them to wear the crown. Sophia said, "Every prayer tonight is for mercy, but none will be answered." The chapel was empty, except for her, and the echo of thunder rolling through stained glass. She clutched her rosary tight, knelt at the altar, whispering names of the dead. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes carried the knowledge of what was to come. She whispered, "God, save them, because no one else will." The silence that followed felt heavier than the storm, as if even heaven refused to listen. She knew the streets would run red before the week was done, and her soul trembled under the weight of that truth. The enforcer Viktor said, "Loyalty is measured in blood, not words." In a dim warehouse, crates of weapons surrounded him like silent witnesses. His towering frame moved with lethal calm, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Men stood before him, trembling under his cold stare. He stepped forward, boots echoing against concrete, and pulled the slide of his pistol with a sharp click. "Anyone thinking of betrayal should speak now," he growled. No one moved. He smirked faintly, whispering, "Good." The sound of rain hammered the tin roof, masking the beating of terrified hearts. The king was dead, but Viktor remained, a shadow of fear and control. Detective Marcus said, "Truth is a luxury no one here can afford." The police precinct reeked of sweat and stale coffee as officers shouted over one another, chasing rumors like vultures. Marcus sat at his cluttered desk, files stacked like tombstones, his cigarette burning down to ash. The room pulsed with chaotic energy, every conversation hinting at rival factions already moving pieces across the board. He whispered to himself, "Every badge is a gamble, every oath a broken card." Outside the blinds, sirens screamed through the city night, a dirge for law long buried. Marcus knew the syndicate was stronger than the law, and loyalty was already cracking from within the force itself. Isabella said, "Family is nothing but a blade dressed as a kiss." She met Luca in a rain-soaked alley, her silk coat dragging across puddles, diamonds flashing under dim street lamps. Luca smirked as if the storm were his ally, but his eyes searched hers for weakness. She whispered, "You think the Empire belongs to you, but I hold the name, the blood." Luca leaned closer, voice dripping with threat. "Names don't win wars, guns do." Lightning split the sky above them, shadows dancing across brick walls as their alliance cracked before it was born. Betrayal lingered between them, like the gun sheathed under each coat. Sophia said, "Every shadow carries a name, every whisper a knife." She walked alone through the graveyard, umbrella trembling in her hands as rain drummed like bullets on stone. She stopped at the king's fresh grave, mud sliding across the carved letters. Kneeling, she whispered, "Your blood feeds this earth, but it will not silence the war." Her tears blended with the storm, face pale under candlelight flickering from a lantern. She clutched the rosary to her chest, but her faith cracked again as she felt unseen eyes watching from beyond the graves. She whispered into the storm, "I am not alone, am I?" Viktor said, "Orders are chains, but blood is freedom." In the dim warehouse office he stood over bound men, their faces bruised, sweat dripping onto the concrete. His pistol rested casually in his massive hand, smoke curling from his cigarette. One man whimpered, begging for mercy. Viktor leaned down, voice low and sharp. "Mercy is a story told to children." He fired once, the echo rattling rusted walls, silence crushing the survivors. He turned to his men, his voice flat, "Betrayal is contagious, kill it before it spreads." They nodded in fear, each wishing they were not breathing in his shadow. Isabella said, "Alleys are forged in desperation, not trust." She met Detective Marcus in a parking garage, lit by a single flickering light. His trench coat dripped with rain, his eyes heavy with doubt. She whispered, "You want justice. I want survival. Help me, and we both win." Marcus studied her, cigarette smoke curling between them like a fragile bridge. "Your Mafia blood," he growled. She leaned closer, whispering, "And your law, but both are dying breeds." Their gazes locked, neither yielding. In that silence, an unholy alliance was born, fragile as glass, sharp as the knives waiting in shadows. Detective Marcus said, "Every truth we chase breeds 1,000 lies." The rain never stopped as he sat in his car, staring through fogged glass at the mansion ruins. Police lights flashed, blue and red bleeding into the night, but their presence felt meaningless. He scribbled notes with shaking hands, names and leads already slipping into contradictions. His phone buzzed with calls, unanswered, voices of superiors demanding explanations he couldn't give. He whispered, "Justice doesn't live here anymore. Only hunger." His reflection in the windshield looked like a stranger, a man drowning in his own conscience. In the distance, he saw a silhouette watching him from the shadows, and the chill told him loyalty had already begun to rot. Isabella said, "The wolves come dressed as brothers." She entered a lavish gathering hall, chandeliers blazing, syndicate families gathered in black suits and veils. Their whispers carried like daggers, each glance a calculation. She wore a silk dress, jewels glittering, her face a mask of grief and resolve. She raised her glass and said, "Blood binds us, but blood also curses us." Eyes turned, some in awe, others in doubt. She felt their gazes strip her bare, testing her strength, waiting for weakness. Inside her chest, her heart thundered not with fear, but fury. She whispered to herself, "They will bow, or they will burn." Sophia said, "Every prayer now is answered in silence." She walked through the ruined streets, where shop windows shattered and alleyways echoed with gunfire. Children huddled behind broken doors, and stray dogs howled at sirens. She carried bread in a basket, her morning dress soaked in rain, face pale but determined. A gangster stopped her, sneering, "Where do you think you're going?" She met his eyes, whispering, "Where God sends me." He laughed, letting her pass, but his gaze lingered with menace. Sophia's steps echoed through the ruin, every shadow reminding her that the Mafia's war wasn't destroying empires, it was devouring the innocent. Viktor said, "Even shadows betray their masters." In the warehouse, he discovered crates emptied, weapons stolen, and men missing. His fists clenched as he realized betrayal had already infected his own ranks. A trembling soldier confessed, "They took the guns for Luca." Viktor's face hardened, voice flat as stone. "And you live to tell me." He raised his pistol and silence followed, smoke curling through broken glass. He turned to the survivors, whispering, "Anyone else want to confess?" Their silence was answer enough. Viktor knew the empire was bleeding from within, and every day his leash on loyalty grew shorter. Isabella said, "The serpent I fed is the serpent that strikes." She walked into her study, the fire crackling, shadows dancing across leather chairs. Her brother Adrian sat waiting, his smirk cutting like a blade. She whispered, "You knew. You orchestrated all of it." Adrian said, "Sister, I didn't just watch the king fall. I pulled the trigger." Her breath froze, betrayal striking deeper than any bullet. She whispered, "You were the blood I trusted." He leaned forward, voice cold, "And that is why I was perfect." The storm outside howled as Isabella realized the empire's fall was not fate, but family. Detective Marcus said, "We were never chasing the Mafia. We were chasing ghosts in suits." He sat in a dim archive room, stacks of classified files around him, the air thick with dust and secrets. His trembling hands turned over documents stamped with government seals, each revealing ties between syndicates and politicians. Photographs showed cartel leaders shaking hands with senators, judges smiling beside assassins. His voice cracked as he whispered, "The king was never the head, he was a pawn just like me." He leaned back, cigarette glowing, shadows flickering across his face. For the first time, Marcus understood the war wasn't just about crime families. It was about the entire world being bought, and soul. Isabella said, "The empire I thought was ours was only a mask." In her candlelit study, she traced her fingers across documents stolen from Adrian's desk. Blueprints of financial networks sprawled before her, arrows linking offshore banks, corporations, and hidden accounts. Her eyes narrowed as she saw names of world leaders, men and women she once thought untouchable. She whispered, "We were never free. We were owned." Her wineglass shook in her hand, rage coursing hotter than grief. For the first time, her ambition faltered under the weight of realizing she was not a queen, only a piece on a far greater board. Sophia said, "The poor starve while kings trade blood like currency." She stood at a crowded soup line, her black mourning dress blending into the shadows. Children clung to their mothers, soldiers watched from corners with rifles slung. She handed bread with shaking hands, her eyes scanning faces marked with hunger and despair. She whispered, "They suffer while the powerful drink their wine." Thunder rolled above, and she felt the crushing truth. The war wasn't about crime at all, it was about power feeding on innocence. Her tears fell silently as she prayed, "If God cannot stop them, who can?" Viktor said, "Every empire needs monsters. That's why they keep me alive." He stood in a lavish hotel penthouse, rain streaking down glass walls, while foreign dignitaries and crime lords feasted at a long table. His hulking frame lingered in the corner, eyes scanning the room, pistol holstered but always near. He listened as deals were whispered, wars planned, fortunes traded like dice. One politician raised a toast, saying, "To the hidden hands that rule the world." Viktor's jaw tightened. He was the blade they wielded, but even blades grew dull. In his silence he realized he was as much a prisoner as anyone else. Adrian said, "You still don't see, sister. We were never kings, we were caretakers." He leaned across Isabella's desk, his voice sharp as glass. He revealed the truth with a smirk, that the cartel was never theirs, but managed for global elites who fed off every war and betrayal. Isabella's eyes blazed as she whispered, "You sold our bloodline for chains." Adrian replied coldly, "I gave us a place at the table." Her hand trembled near the pistol hidden under papers, her breath burning with rage. The storm outside cracked, lightning flooding the room, as she finally realized the betrayal was not just of family, it was of their very existence. Detective Marcus said, "Truth is a noose, and tonight it hangs us all." The estate loomed on a lonely hill, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Rain battered the gates as Marcus and Isabella approached, weapons hidden beneath their coats. The silence of the night was broken only by the hiss of tires as Viktor arrived, his towering frame moving with grim purpose. Isabella whispered, "Inside those walls is the hand that wrote our fate." Marcus lit his last cigarette, his voice flat, "Then let's burn the script." Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating their determined faces as the storm of reckoning began. Viktor said, "The lion's den smells of fear before the first roar." Inside the mansion's grand hall, golden chandeliers blazed above polished marble floors, reflecting opulence drenched in menace. Crime lords and politicians feasted at long tables, their laughter hollow. Marcus scanned the room, hand close to his gun. Isabella's eyes locked on Adrian at the head of the table, his smirk curling like a blade. Adrian rose and declared, "Welcome to the Theater of Kings." The air thickened as silence fell, each breath sharpened by suspicion. Marcus whispered to Isabella, "One wrong move, and we all die here." Adrian said, "You came for justice, but justice is just another commodity." He leaned across the table, his glass of wine untouched, his voice echoing like a sermon. Isabella snapped, "You betrayed blood for power." Adrian laughed, "Power doesn't betray, it survives." Viktor's fists clenched, his eyes burning with conflict. Marcus slammed a folder of evidence onto the table, photographs spilling out. He growled, "This is the end of your empire." Adrian's smirk widened. "Empires don't end, detective. They evolve." The storm outside roared as the air inside thickened, every word dragging them closer to war. Viktor said, "The only truth left is written in bullets." He drew his pistol, as guards flooded the hall, weapons raised. Chaos erupted. Glass shattered, chandeliers swung wildly as gunfire thundered. Marcus dove behind the table, pulling Isabella down as bullets ripped the air. Adrian's laughter echoed through the violence, his voice cold, "Kill them all." Viktor moved like a beast unleashed, cutting through guards with brutal precision. Isabella crawled across the floor, reaching for Adrian, her fury burning brighter than fear. Marcus yelled, "Don't die for vengeance, live for the truth." But her eyes never left her brother. Isabella said, "This ends with blood, mine or yours." She stood across from Adrian, in the shattered hall, smoke and fire licking the walls. Her pistol shook in her hand, her eyes ablaze with rage. Adrian spread his arms wide, smirking. "Then shoot, sister. Prove we were born for this." Marcus shouted from behind, "Don't do it, expose him, don't become him." Viktor limped forward, bloodied but still standing, his voice ragged, "Choose redemption, not ruin." The storm outside raged as Isabella's finger hovered on the trigger, her heart torn between vengeance and survival. In that silence the world waited. Isabella said, "Victory tastes like ash upon my tongue." The estate's grand hall lay in ruin, its chandeliers shattered like broken crowns across blood-soaked marble. The storm outside had passed, but its echo lingered in the silence. Adrian's body lay crumpled at her feet, lifeless eyes staring into eternity, his smirk extinguished. Her pistol slipped from trembling hands, clattering against stone, echoing louder than any gunshot. Detective Marcus stood in the shadows, cigarette glowing, his voice gravelly. "You've won, but nothing is cleansed. The world outside still rots." Viktor, leaning on a cracked pillar, blood running down his coat, whispered, "Empires don't die. They just change names." Isabella's tears cut through soot on her cheeks as the first light of dawn bled into the ruins. Detective Marcus said, "The empire has fallen, but the foundation is untouched." The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters, their cameras flashing like lightning, microphones thrust forward. Marcus pushed through, a folder of evidence clutched in his hand like a final weapon. He handed it to the press, his trench coat drenched in morning rain, his cigarette burning low. Questions screamed around him, but his eyes drifted past them, lost in the futility of it all. He whispered, "Justice is only another story for them to rewrite." As he stepped away, flashes lit his weary face, the world eager for headlines while he carried only ghosts. The system would devour the truth, but at least the blood on his hands wasn't hidden anymore. Sophia said, "The war ended, but its echoes haunt every stone." She walked through a ruined street where collapsed walls leaned over children, laughing faintly in rubble, their joy fragile and forced. The chapel bell tolled weakly, its cracked metal voice shaking like a survivor clinging to faith. Sophia handed bread to a boy whose hollow cheeks lit up with a smile too old for his years. She whispered, "Live, even when the world forgets." But inside her eyes, grief hollowed deeper than hope. She knelt before the chapel, rosary trembling in her hands, murmuring prayers that dissolved into the wind. The city bore scars no sermon could heal, and she knew redemption belonged only to memory, not tomorrow. Viktor said, "I was their weapon, and now I am discarded steel." He stood atop a rain-slick rooftop at night, overlooking the city pulsing in neon haze. His trench coat clung to his bloodied frame, cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. He watched the streets below, where deals were already being struck, gangs shifting into power vacuums, proving nothing truly ended. His scarred face betrayed regret for the first time, as though his soul bore the weight of every body he buried. He whispered, "Monsters never die. They only find new masters." Crushing the cigarette beneath his boot, he stared at the skyline. A soldier without a war, a weapon without a purpose, haunted by ghosts that would never let him rest. Isabella said, "Survival is not freedom. It is another cage." She walked alone through a deserted street at dawn, fog rolling low as golden light bled into the horizon. Her silk coat clung to her like a funeral shroud, each step echoing against silence. Behind her the Empire's ruins smoldered, black smoke curling like unburied ghosts. A payphone rang in the distance, shrill and metallic, cutting the stillness like a blade. She froze, her breath sharp, her eyes hollow. Marcus's words echoed in her head, Viktor's warnings too. She whispered, "The war is over, but the price never ends." The camera pulled back, her figure fading into fog as the ringing phone screamed unanswered.